In my early 20s, I found myself caught in a relentless cycle of saying yes to everyone and everything. It wasn't something I ever consciously chose to do. It just happened. I said yes when friends asked for favors, when family needed me, when colleagues expected me to stay late at work. It seemed harmless at first, even commendable. After all, who doesn't want to be the dependable one, the person everyone turns to when they need something? But what started as a way to be helpful and liked slowly morphed into a pattern that began to drain me. It took me years to recognize that I had lost a part of myself in the process. The constant need to please others, the pressure to be everything to everyone, left me empty, tired, and disconnected from the person I had once been. I didn't realize how much I was giving until I had nothing left to give. I had always been the yes girl growing up. If someone asked me to do something, I couldn't turn them down. I didn't want to disappoint anyone. I thought that if I could be helpful, accommodating, and available at all times, I would be loved and appreciated. It was my way of ensuring I was valuable in the eyes of others. I had convinced myself that my worth was tied to my ability to say yes, to be needed. It became my identity. But over time, I began to feel overwhelmed by the weight of my own commitments. I started to notice the cracks forming in my friendships, in my work relationships, and even in my family dynamics. Saying yes was no longer just about helping others. It was about avoiding conflict, avoiding the discomfort of saying no, and avoiding the fear that someone might be disappointed in me. One day, I was sitting at my desk at work, trying to focus on a project I had been meaning to complete for weeks. I had a deadline looming over me, and the pressure was mounting. Just as I was getting into a groove, my phone buzzed with a message from a coworker. She asked if I could cover her shift that afternoon. I paused for a moment, considering my options. I had already planned to take a break that afternoon, something I'd been needing for weeks. I felt the familiar rush of guilt wash over me. I didn't want to say no, not because I couldn't cover the shift, but because I didn't want her to think I was difficult, selfish, or unwilling to help. Without even thinking, I typed out a quick response. "Sure, I can do that." As the day wore on, I found myself growing increasingly resentful. I couldn't focus on the project I had been working on, and I felt frustrated that I had sacrificed my own needs once again to please someone else. When I finally left work that evening, I was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. I had given so much of my time and energy to other people that I had nothing left for myself. It was in that moment that I realized something had to change. I couldn't keep living this way. I had to learn how to say no, how to set boundaries, how to take care of myself first. I wish I could say that the decision to change was easy, but it wasn't. The first time I said no to someone was a huge struggle. It felt like a betrayal, like I was letting them down. I remember the first time I said no to a close friend who had asked for my help with something I didn't want to do. It was a small thing, something that didn't matter much in the grand scheme of things, but to me, it felt like a monumental act. I had been saying yes for so long that even the smallest no seemed like a big deal. My heart pounded in my chest as I typed the message, and my hands trembled slightly. I was so afraid of disappointing her, of her thinking I didn't care, of her being mad at me. But I told myself that I had to do this. I had to practice saying no if I was ever going to take control of my life again. I hit send and braced myself for the fallout. But to my surprise, she didn't react negatively. She understood and even thanked me for being honest. In that moment, I realized something important. I didn't have to sacrifice my own well-being for the sake of others. Saying no didn't mean I was a bad person. It just meant I was taking care of myself. That first no was like a small crack in the dam. It didn't solve everything, but it opened the door for me to start saying no more often. I started setting boundaries in small ways at first. When someone asked me to do something that didn't align with my values or my needs, I simply said no. I stopped making excuses or trying to justify my decision. I didn't need to explain myself or apologize. I could just say no, and that was enough. It wasn't easy at first. I still had moments of guilt, of second-guessing myself, of worrying what others would think. But the more I practiced, the easier it became. I remember the first time I said no to my boss at work. She asked me to take on an additional project that I knew would stretch me too thin. I had enough on my plate already, and I wasn't sure I could handle it without sacrificing. For the longest time, I would have said yes, afraid of looking lazy or uncooperative. But this time, I took a deep breath and said, I'm afraid I can't take on that project right now. I'm already working on several tasks, and I want to make sure I give them my full attention. She looked at me for a moment, and then she nodded. I had expected her to be upset or disappointed, but instead she thanked me for being honest and for prioritizing my workload. In that moment, I realized that saying no didn't always lead to negative outcomes. Sometimes it led to more respect and understanding. As I continued to practice saying no, I started to notice subtle changes in my life. My relationships became more balanced. I wasn't constantly bending over backward to accommodate others at the expense of my own needs. I was able to spend more time doing things I truly enjoyed, like reading, exercising, and spending quality time with the people who mattered most to me. My energy levels improved, and I started feeling more connected to myself and my values. I no longer felt like I was living for everyone else. I was finally living for me. But learning to say no wasn't just about rejecting requests or setting boundaries with others. It was also about saying yes to myself. I realized that by saying no to the things that drained me or didn't serve me, I was creating space to say yes to the things that truly mattered. I started saying yes to self-care, to my own passions and hobbies, to my mental and physical well-being. I began to prioritize the things that brought me joy and fulfillment, instead of constantly putting others' needs before my own. Of course, there were still times when I felt guilty or questioned my decisions. There were times when I said no and worried that I was letting someone down. But as I continued to practice saying no, I began to understand that setting boundaries wasn't just about protecting myself. It was also about teaching others to respect my time and energy. When I said no, I wasn't being selfish. I was being self-respecting. And over time, the people around me began to understand that. They respected my boundaries, and many of them even started to set their own. Learning to say no wasn't an overnight transformation. It took time, patience, and a lot of trial and error, but eventually I became more comfortable with it. I stopped worrying about what others thought, and I started focusing on what was best for me. I realized that saying no wasn't about being rigid or inflexible. It was about making space for the things that truly mattered and letting go of the things that didn't. In the end, saying no wasn't just about turning down requests or setting boundaries. It was about taking control of my life. It was about recognizing my own worth and knowing that I didn't have to sacrifice my happiness to make others happy. By learning to say no, I was finally able to say yes to myself, and that made all the difference.